We all love a good mystery, right? And history is full of them. For everything we know about ancient civilizations across the earth, there are plenty more mysteries yet to be solved. I'm your host, James, and join me as I bring you the top 10 unsolved mysteries from ancient civilizations that confused experts. And we're kicking off the list with the Moai of Easter Island. This mystery gets placed in that same kind of category as the Great Pyramids, where extraterrestrials are often brought into it, because how else did these ancient people construct and move these giant, incredibly heavy statues? The Moai are a pretty mind-boggling feat of ancient engineering. They were carved by the Rapa Nui people between 1250 and 1500. They're massive, standing around 13 feet and weighing about 14 tons each. So how the heck did these folks manage to create and move these things? First of all, they carved them out of volcanoes. Then they somehow managed to transport these massive things without any wheels or horses. The main theory, aside from all the alien stuff, is that they laid them flat on a system of sledges made from wood and then used a rocking motion to move them forward. They didn't just plop these statues down wherever they felt like it either. They were strategically placed along ceremonial platforms called ahu, scattered across the island. No one's entirely sure what the significance is of these specific locations. Next up, we have the Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines are a series of ancient geoglyphs located in the Nazca Desert of southern Peru. They depict various shapes, including animals, plants, and geometric patterns, and the exact purpose and meaning of these etchings, still a mystery. Some theories suggest they might have been used for astronomical or religious purposes, but the strange thing is the scale of the designs means they can really only be appreciated from the air, like looking down. And people weren't really looking down at the earth 2,000 years ago. So who were these for? Were they used to appease gods? One of the wilder theories is that beings from outer space, again, were involved somehow. There are all kinds of different images depicted here: birds, monkeys, various different plants. But there's also what is often referred to by archaeologists as the astronaut. It looks to be kind of a humanoid figure, but the size of the eyes and the shape of its body resembles maybe some sort of spacesuit or your classic extraterrestrial type being, your standard gray. So pretty interesting stuff. Number 8, the lost colony of Roanoke. In 1587, an attempt was made to establish a colony on Roanoke Island in what is now North Carolina. John White led a group of approximately 115 settlers, which included women and children, to establish this colony. White ended up leaving the island, though, returning to England for more supplies and assistance, leaving the settlers behind. White was unable to return until 3 years later, and this is where the mystery begins. White found the colony completely deserted. There was no sign of settlers. The only clue was the word Croatoan carved into the post and crow on a tree. This is really the only clue we have to go on. And there's speculation that the settlers may have relocated to Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras Island. There's no definitive answer as to what happened to these people, but there are a couple likely possibilities. One is that the settlers integrated with local Native American tribes on that island, as suggested by the mention of Croatoan. Another theory is that the settlers died from starvation or conflict with said indigenous population. And then there's a third possibility that they were just like, forget this, and opted to sail back to England on some like rickety homemade boats and died at sea. In at number 7 is the Antikythera Mechanism. This has to be one of the most amazing artifacts ever discovered. So this object was found in 1901 in the wreckage of an ancient ship off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. It's believed to have been created in order to calculate astronomical positions, but researchers still aren't 100% sure on that. It's dated back around 150 and 100 BC, and for the time, it's a pretty complex device, full of all these complex like sets of gears and dials. It's almost almost feels like an ancient computer. So the question is, how did the ancient Greeks manage to create something as advanced as this with the more limited resources and knowledge of the time? Just really seems as if there could be a lot more about their civilization we still don't fully comprehend. Next up, we have the case of the Green Children. I absolutely love this story. It is so weird and just very intriguing. In the village of Woolpit in England during the 12th century, two very odd young siblings, a brother and a sister, arrived in town. What made them so strange, you ask? Well, for starters, their skin was green. They also spoke in a tongue that nobody understood and wore these strange clothes that nobody in the village recognized. They would refuse to eat food offered to them initially, but eventually they started to adapt to their new environment. They ended up learning English, and even their skin started taking on a more natural hue. They would go on to explain that they came from a subterranean world where the sun never shined and everyone had green skin. As for how they found themselves in Woolpit, apparently they had been looking after their father's cattle when they heard a loud noise, and then suddenly, bam, they were in the village, as if they'd been transported there in an instant. The brother never made it to adulthood, but his sister ended up going on to lead a pretty normal life for the time. She married a man from the village, started a family. So, what the hell went on here? One explanation is that the youngsters could have had some kind of condition that had turned their skin green. Maybe they'd gotten lost in the woods and got sick and turned kind of greenish too. There's also a theory that maybe they witnessed their family die in like a horrible way, and then made up a wild story about coming from this fantastical place, almost as a way to cope. But that still leaves the clothing and the strange language. One theory is that they could have been migrants who were abandoned by their family, and their language and fashion sense just wasn't known to the people at the time. And then, of course, you got your other fun, much more fantastical theories out there, that perhaps there really was this long-lost civilization that lived underground, or maybe they had crossed over from some alternate dimension. Who knows, right? All we really know is that this is a very strange story from a very long time ago. Next on the list, we have the Voynich Manuscript. I also find this one very entertaining. What we have here is this centuries-old book that's basically total nonsense. This book is a complete mystery. Not only does no one know who actually penned it, but nobody even knows what it says. It's written in an unknown language of some kind. It's named after Wilfred Voynich, a rare book dealer who bought it in 1912. The manuscript is full of strange drawings of plants, and many of these plants don't actually exist. Some pages look like herbal manuals, others look like astronomy guides, but the meaning behind a lot of the illustrations is just like, who knows? It's believed to have been written and illustrated around 1420. Over the years, many researchers have analyzed it, and there are a number of interesting ideas as to what it could mean, but no definitive answers. Some think the book is holding some hidden knowledge of some kind, but another interesting theory is that there actually is no meaning to the book. Maybe whoever wrote it was out of their mind completely, or they'd created it as some bizarre art piece, maybe even for a laugh. And if that's the case, then whoever they were truly out of their time, and I tip my hat. Also, maybe this book came from the same place where the Green Children came from. It's an interest. I just put that together now. I'm smart. In at number 4 is the Yonaguni Monument in Japan, often referred to as Japan's Atlantis. Now, there's some debate as to whether this was a lost city, or if the Yonaguni Monument is just the result of naturally occurring formations. It was discovered in 1986 by a diver named Kihachiro Aratake, and it was an incredible discovery. Like, what was this structure? Could it be some sort of ancient temple? Was it only part of something even bigger? Or was it just a natural formation? Certainly does not look natural to me. I mean, just looking at some of these images, there's what looks to be steps, columns, walls. Some people believe the monument is just part of remnants of a sunken city belonging to some prehistoric advanced civilization. People on the other side argue that the formations were likely formed by tectonic activity and erosion over thousands of years. But I have a hard time looking at images like this and thinking that these are naturally occurring. I mean, look at those steps. Like, they're so evenly placed, right? Anyway, number 3, the Baghdad Battery. The Baghdad Battery is an archaeological find that dates back to between 250 BCE and 224 CE. It was discovered in a small village near Baghdad, Iraq in 1936. It consists of a terracotta pot, then you got this copper cylinder and an iron rod. The pot is about 5 inches in height and houses the copper cylinder that surrounds the iron rod. The top of the copper cylinder is capped with an asphalt plug. So, some think it might have been an ancient kind of battery of some sort. As for the use of this battery, one theory is that it was used for putting a thin layer of metal on stuff, like gold or silver coat. Others think it may not have been a battery at all, that it could have been used for just like holding important scrolls or medicine. The problem is, there aren't any records or writings from back then to tell us for sure what this thing was. So, still don't know. In its second place is the ghost city of Bhangarh. Bhangarh is a deserted town located in the Alwar district of Rajasthan, India. During the 16th century, it was a thriving town, but for some reason, or reasons that aren't entirely clear, everyone left. There are legends as to what happened here, though. One tale involves a man who fell in love with the princess of Bhangarh. He knew he'd never win her heart in the traditional sense, being of a much lower class. So, just like anyone would, he resorted to dark magic to cast a spell on her. But the legend goes that the spell backfired on him at the princess's hands, and before his death, he decided to curse the town, predicting its ruin. The population of Bhangarh began to decline for a number of factors. Some say the scarcity of water in the region and the lack of economic opportunities caused this mass exodus. Till this day, though, its temples, palaces, and gateways all stand, relatively anyway. They're not quite in mint condition. It's said to be one of the most haunted places in India. It's thought to be so dangerous that there's a board at the entrance that warns visitors against entering the site after sunset and before sunrise. Finally, we have the classic Maya Collapse. The classic Maya Collapse refers to the Maya cities in Mexico and Central America that went downhill around the 8th and 9th centuries. Now, the Maya people were not actually just one group. There were several small city-states, all with their own political structures. Their culture and religion was similar, but they were kind of doing their own thing. There were also various languages across the board. Maya cities were scattered across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They built these remarkable structures and had advanced knowledge of mathematics and astronomy. The reasons behind the classic Maya collapse are kind of tough to pinpoint because some city-states declined while others rose, and it was all happening at various times. Environmental changes were likely a big factor. Warfare between these city-states was also common. Economic factors also probably played a big role in the collapse. With all that said though, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.